There was a night in history when an entire nation ran for their lives. Behind them, the most powerful army on earth was coming. Before them, an endless sea blocked their escape. No bridge, no boats, no way forward. Thousands of frightened families stood trapped between water and war. Children cried. Mothers held their babies tightly. Men stared into the darkness, knowing death was approaching. Then suddenly, the wind began to blow. Not a gentle breeze, but a violent wind that roared across the ocean. And what happened next became one of the most terrifying and powerful miracles ever recorded. Because that night, the sea opened. It began on a night filled with urgency and fear. After generations of slavery in Egypt, the people of Israel were finally leaving the land that had oppressed them for hundreds of years. Families moved quickly through the darkness, carrying children, gathering what little they owned. Old men leaned on walking sticks. Mothers guided tired donkeys loaded with supplies. And at the front of the Great Migration walked a man holding a wooden staff, a man chosen by God. His name was Moses. For the first time in their lives, they were no longer slaves, no whips cracking in the morning,
No chains biting their hands, no masters shouting commands, only the quiet desert and the fragile hope of freedom. But freedom had not yet been secured. Far behind them, inside the royal palace of Egypt, a terrible realization struck the king. An entire nation of slaves had just walked away. The labor that built Egypt's cities, the people who served the empire, were gone. Pharaoh rose from his throne in fury. His pride burned with rage, and he gave a terrifying command: prepare the army. Within minutes, Egypt's greatest warriors were gathering. Horses were strapped to war chariots. Spears and shields were lifted. Armor clanged under torchlight. 600 elite chariots stood ready, along with thousands of soldiers. The most powerful army in the ancient world was preparing for war. Soon the desert thundered with the sound of chariot wheels. Hundreds of horses raced across the sand. Dust clouds rose into the night sky. Torchlights flickered through the storm of sand. Pharaoh himself rode at the front, and the most powerful army on earth was coming. Meanwhile, the Israelites continued their journey through the wilderness, but suddenly something terrifying appeared before them: the vast waters of the sea, endless, dark, uncrossable. The waves crashed violently against the shore, and the people stopped in confusion. There was no bridge, no boats, no path forward. They were trapped. Thousands of people stood helplessly along the shoreline. Behind them, the desert stretched into darkness. Before them, the sea roared with crashing waves. And somewhere behind them, the Egyptian army was coming. Then someone saw it, a cloud of dust rising on the horizon. At first, it looked small, but it grew larger and larger, until torches appeared inside the dust. Spears glimmered in the darkness. War chariots thundered across the desert. Pharaoh's army had arrived. Fear exploded through the camp. People began shouting. Some cried.
Others turned against Moses. "Why did you bring us here? Were there no graves in Egypt? Now we will die in the wilderness." Chaos spread through the crowd. The people were certain this was the end. But Moses stood calm, unshaken. The wind pulled at his cloak as he turned toward the terrified people. Then he spoke words that would echo through history. "Do not be afraid. Stand still and watch what God will do." Then something strange happened. A powerful wind began to blow across the sea. At first it was gentle, but it grew stronger and stronger. The wind howled through the darkness. Waves twisted unnaturally. The sea began to move. All night long the wind roared across the water. And then the impossible happened. The sea began to divide. Water rose on both sides, higher and higher, until massive walls of water stood towering above the ground. And between them, a path appeared. dry land, through the middle of the sea. And the people of Israel walked forward, step by step, into the ocean. Walls of water rose beside them like towering glass mountains. Fish swam in the glowing depths. Torches lit the path between the waves. Children stared in amazement. Parents whispered prayers. And thousands of people crossed the sea on dry ground. But Pharaoh's army did not stop. Blinded by pride and rage, they charged into the sea. Chariots thundered between the walls of water. Horses galloped across the seafloor. Spears raised. War cries echoed through the corridor of waves. They were certain victory was near, but they were riding straight into disaster. When the last Israelite reached the far shore, Moses stepped forward. He lifted his staff toward the sky. Storm clouds rolled above the ocean. Lightning flashed across the water, and Moses raised his hand one final time. Suddenly, the wind stopped. The towering walls of water began to collapse. The sea rushed back with unstoppable power. Gigantic waves crashed down. Chariots were swallowed. Horses vanished beneath the flood. The mighty army of Egypt disappeared beneath the sea. By morning, the storm had passed. The sea was calm again. Golden sunlight rose over the horizon, and the people of Israel stood quietly on the shore, free. The army that once ruled them was gone. The chains of slavery were broken forever. What looked like the end had become the beginning of freedom. Because sometimes, the road to freedom leads straight through the sea.